everyone, I just thought I'd pop in for a few minutes and we'll have a little bit of a short discussion on the ALP policy surrounding the cashless debit card, because I want to try and make things as simple as possible from my understanding of their policy. So, ALP is saying no cashless debit card, right? And they voted that way at the last vote. And they argued strongly against it, and they also considered the compulsory aspect of it and other things to do with it, and their policy is no cashless debit card. However, they support voluntary income management. Now, there's a difference. Income management is the basics card, which at this time, thanks to LNP policy, is compulsory. They want to remove that element of the basics card and enable people to have free choice, voluntary, informed consent, which means that they receive all the information properly to make an informed decision if they want to be able to volunteer for that. Or it is used in a court-ordered situation regarding child safety and under the Vulnerable Persons Act. We can't argue with that, with voluntary income management. Now, let me clarify the differences in the two. Basics card is controlled by Centrelink. The person's human rights are still intact. The person's legal, consumer protections, social security protections, their legal rights are protected. Under a voluntary scheme, they are also able to get off of it at any time, and they could have the choice of going off of it, and if they feel that they need it again, they could go on it. Right, the cashless debit card is a fully privatised scheme. It is contracted to Indu, contracting the person to Indu without their consent, removing their consumer protections under law, their privacy, their autonomy, their human rights, their statutory rights. Okay? And it's not controlled by Centrelink, it's controlled by Services Australia, which again is a different sector. Indu is not accountable to the Senate, the public, the government, you or me, no one. They're accountable to no one. And they're for-profit organisation. Simple as that. Whereas the basics card is controlled by the government. Now, the reason why the basics card can't just be stopped is the current legislation around the basics card doesn't allow for it to have any changes made to it until December 2022. That is when its sunset clause comes up, and that's when whichever government is in power at the time can then make changes to that legislation. Whether they can use a disallowance motion, whether they can change it back from compulsory to voluntary, and what they can change the whole policy, but they can't do anything with it. So if we had an election this year, right, Labor can't automatically change the basics card policy until December 22. But being that they're in Parliament, you know, if they're in government in 2022, then they can change it. And that's what they want to do. So it's voluntary informed consent. People will be able to get off it. Now, you've got to consider that for a generation, right, First Nations people in the Territory have been on this card. We have a generation of people who have lived on the basics card, been born into it and don't know any other way. And that's why you can't just go close it off, because those people need to have the choice, and they need to then have access to financial counsellors to learn how to live without the card that's all they know. So it's a bit more complicated than what you think. But overall, the ALP policy is no compulsory income management and no cashless debit card. Okay? That's the best way I can put it to people. So you have to understand, income management is the basics card, right? Cashless debit card is the Indu cashless debit card. They are, at this time, they are both compulsory forced income management. Labor don't want it to be that way, right? And they want people to be able to have an informed choice, which is what citizens are entitled to have. You are going to have people that will want to stay on their basics card because they're comfortable with it. But with removing the compulsory aspect of it means that they'll have the freedom to get off it if they want to, right? What we need to do is to make sure that the cashless debit card is stopped. That's what we need to do. And we need to be able to say to Labor, well, it's all well and good saying we don't support cashless debit card. We don't support compulsory income management. So are you, when the election comes up, are you going to endeavour to stop the cashless debit card? Bear in mind, they can't change the legislation for the basics card until December 2022. That's like carved in stone, the way that that's been set out. And that's because the LNP extended it, right, 2017 through to 2022. And only the government of the day can do any changes to it when that time comes up. So I hope that makes it as clear as mud. But at the same, Labor do not support compulsory income management. They no longer support the cashless debit card, period. Right? The Greens, we know, do not support forced income management of any kind, compulsory or the cashless debit card. But we need a change of government. We need to get rid of the LNP. And the only way we're going to get change is through an ALP government and with the Greens backup. You know what I mean? That's the bottom line. We have to get rid of the LNP in One Nation. And that needs to be the focus. And we need to keep on Labor's back about being more vocal about they will stop the cashless debit card. Right? We can all handle, I see comments in front of me, no card at all. And I used to have that opinion as well myself. But we saw with the Cape York Basics Card program when it was run by the FRC and it was voluntary with all supports put in and family support and elders, that program worked for those people up there, right? But an income management can only work for a person if it's voluntary and it's not impeding on their human rights, it's not impeding on their autonomy, okay? It's not impeding on them, on their soul, you know what I mean? When it's forced, it strips people of their leave, So we just have to be aware. Basics card, voluntary, informed consent, people will have the freedom to get off the system, right? People will have the choice apart from people that are court ordered under a Child Safety Act or a vulnerable person's ruling. Do you know what I mean? Which is for somebody's safety anyway. You can't argue with those things. But for compulsory forced income management like the cashless debit card, we all want it gone. We want the privatisation stopped. We want the Indu card gone. And we want all of those people that are trapped on that card to have their rights restored under law. Have their rights under rule of law, presumption of innocence, non-discrimination, statutory rights, all put back and restored so that people are equal citizens in this country. And and that's what we've got to work for. And we need to change the government to do that. And we have a two-party system. So you need the ALP to be able to be in government, and then you need the Greens to have enough power to push things along, and whatever crossbenches there we need, not like the crossbench we've got now. We've got to get rid of One Nation as well. We don't need the toxic right-wing element of a nasty Senate. You know what I mean? So Ticole asks, can Labor stop Indu? Is this locked off from change too? No, because the cashless debit card at the moment in the last bill, they tried to make it a permanent fixture and they failed. And that expires on December 2022 in line with the basics card. So the goal there is to make sure that the cashless debit card can't be extended past that date. That's when it will come up for the vote again as to whether to extend it, make it permanent or whatever, depending on which government's in. If we've got ALP in, that's where they can stop it. All right, because it's only locked in until 2022. All right, and then it comes down to what contracts have the LNP signed that the ALP have got to work their way through. But at the end, at the moment, the end date of the current cashless debit card trial is 2022, in line with the basics card. So I'm only hypothesizing here. This is only my idea, right? If the logical thing to do is, if they come into government, they can't do anything with the basics card till 2022. They make it easier for people to get off the cashless debit card leading up to the 2022 December date, right? This is what I would do. And that way you get a lot more people getting off the card. And then by the time December 2022 comes round, you vote to stop the cashless debit card, and then you change the parameters of the compulsory basics card to voluntary with informed consent, and then you put in the social supports that communities may need in order to have the confidence to come off the basics card, if you know what I mean. That's what I would do, but that's me. That's what I would be doing with the policy. Is if I won government, I would be getting so many people off the card that wanted to come off. I would make the exit program a far more simpler thing where people didn't have to jump through hoops and be denied on stupid reasons, right? You know, and unless there's a court order in place, that's the only thing that could snag somebody when there's a child safety concern at risk. But even so, that person could be transitioned back onto the basics card, you know, income management instead. Or there is other services that can also step in with child issues, you know, child safety issues. So, yeah, that's my view on it. So basically we got to change the government. The focus is get rid of the LNP and One Nation, and make sure that we've got enough people in the Senate that if ALP get the majority in the House of Reps, then they can change all the legislations and the bills to their heart's content. You don't have to worry about a hostile Senate if they've got the numbers. And I'm not talking about a one-seat majority here. I'm talking about having a majority in the House of Reps. The only way you're going to get that is people have to vote primarily ALP. And it's not about, I mean, some people are going to go, your page is ALP stooge. No. I've sat doing this for 6 years between ALP and Greens, and I don't belong to either political party. But at the end of the day, we need to change the government, because this country cannot afford another 4 years of LNP austerity and let's destroy the Australian people policies. We just can't afford it. You know? So Paul Frayne says a family member read the pamphlet and thought it was all a joke. Oh, tell that to the 12,000 people that are currently on the card, and the other 25,000 that are facing it over the next 9 months if it's shoved in their faces, if they transition in the Northern Territory. It's no joke. And that family member needs to realise that people committing suicide over the loss of their autonomy, people going bankrupt, people forced into financial destitution is not a joke. you know, anyway, and all the rest of the stuff that goes on. I'm just reading other comments here. Yeah, Lynette Holmes, such a card should be voluntary or court approved. We had a family member who was not able to manage his financial affairs and we took it to court and he was put under the trustees. That's right, because the person's capacity is then assessed, and if they're deemed that they don't have capacity, then that's where the public trustee is utilised in order to protect that person. You must make sure then that the public trustee is doing their job properly. You know what I mean? That's the main thing. And the public trustee has its issues, but that's the thing. And the guardianship board and things like that. You know, there are other ways apart from forced income management. So anyway, I just thought I'd clarify that because there was a little bit of toing and froing on the comments, and I thought we need to understand. We need a Labor government. We need the Greens right there to push them along, right? And we need to get rid of the LNP in One Nation. You know, simple as that. That's what the focus needs to be, is to get rid of the LNP. Get rid of this sleazy, self-indulgent government that's not looking after the people. All right? And then we need to, you know, change it. It would, you know, we need to know that that's the only way I can explain the ALP policy. Is, you know, when you hear Linda Burney say we don't support mandatory cashless debit card, but we do support voluntary income management with informed consent. Now you know what the difference is between the two, and it's a huge difference. It originally started with a group of Aboriginal women approaching the Country Labor Party in Darwin, asking for some sort of card that they could put the shopping money on so that their abusers at the time didn't take all their money for food. And it started off voluntary. It started off with cooking classes, financial supports, and a caseworker. And then Johnny Howard comes in and bulldozes into the communities with the army, with the NT intervention, strips away all the supports, and bang, compulsory income management, and destroys the whole system from being what it was for. And that was when it was voluntary with informed consent, with services wrapped around it for supports for the people that asked for it. That's what it started out like before the John Howard government brought in the Northern Territory intervention and bastardised it and turned it into what it is. And now we've got this government who's introduced the cashless debit card, which is the basics card on steroids, but by the privatisation of it, strips those people that are on the card, right? And now it's so many more than just First Nations people. It's still racist policy, of course, because that's what it was born of, because originally it was only given to First Nations people because the Howard government suspended the Racial Discrimination Act to make sure it only went to Aboriginal people. All right, so there you go. You've got a history lesson in one here of where it started and where it's at. And people who would like to remain on a form of income management should have the choice. All right, what can you do? I don't know why Labor under Gillard and Rudd changed, or they did change the Racial Discrimination Act so that it stopped being discrimination and they restored that sector of things. But that then made it so in the Northern Territory, anybody who was on a Social Security payment ended up on it, right? And they did start a trial that was only supposed to go until 2017, okay, in the 5 areas outside of the Northern Territory for people, I believe at the time it was for under 22s, but it was a trial only, and it was supposed to end 2017, and the LNP government, when that sunset clause came up, that's when the LNP government extended it more. And yeah, I don't know. We've got to look to the future, not the past, and stop digging up the past, because we're not going to have a future under an LNP government. I can tell you now, we're not going to have NDIS. We're not going to have people getting the care they need. We've got too many aged care people dying, being abused in care, starving, malnutrition. You look around, people on job seeker, youth allowance, right? People that are in the older age bracket, older women now are the biggest at risk of homelessness, starvation, malnutrition, and unable to get medications, right? Where do I stop? When we look at this whole situation that we're in at the moment, right, we have, when you take into considering every sector of our population, about 8 million people are on some form of social security payment, and this government is destroying everybody on any form of social security payment, whether you youth allowance or pensioner, carer, disability, right, and then being wrapped up under the cashless debit card and handed over to a private company to control, because this government's shirking its responsibility to the Australian people while they're kicking the boot in. We don't have an option. We need to change this, right? Because we've already got too many people robo-debt, 2,000 plus died. We don't know how many people have died since being forced on the cashless debit card. I saw some figures, now I don't know where they came from, right, that said over the course of the last 7 years, all right, 38,000 people have died since this government came in regards to like sort of Centrelink related. But of that, 18,000 people directly related to issues with their Centrelink have died, right? With the attack on every sector, and then you've got the attack on low-paid workers, gig economy casuals that are not protected, thanks to, again, One Nation and LNP, right, under the last lot of omnibus laws that came in for workers. The casualised workforce missed out on their protections, and the gig economy, which leads to more wage theft, low wages. People can't get off social security because they can't earn a livable income even if they are working. Housing crisis, which is beyond stupid. We can't afford to go through another 4 years of this and just watch it get worse and worse and worse. So it's about time to stop but Labor did this before, because remember, try and think about how many years in the last 50 years has a Labor government actually been in, right? And you'll find that the Liberal government's been in a lot more than the Labor. And it's just getting ridiculous. It is just getting ridiculous. And we can't afford, we must move forward and we must make change, because our children deserve it. We need to fight for our social security system and keep it under government control, not private hands, not give away the money to private operators, job agencies, Parents Next, right, robo-debt, cashless debit card. We've got to get rid of the punitive system that's killing our kids. It's killing their souls. It's killing people inside. The punitive system is destroying people, and it all needs to be changed, right? So things need to be changed, and it's going to take people like us lobbying and rallying and trying to get people to stand up and say, we need change. You're not going to get change from an LNP government that's only interested in looking after its mining mates and its big business. You know, we've got to get the narrative back to Australia's going to look after its people more than its top 10% businesses. You know what I mean? Stop. As I call it, they call it trickle-down economics. I call it trickle up and let's piss down on you, excuse the French, because they're sucking the money from the poor at every angle they can, so that somebody can go and live on a yacht on the weekend and can eat the best of food and have the best of medical care and live in a lovely home, But Joe Bloggs out here on the street can't even have a home. All right, and then is told when there's no emergency housing that living in your car is now considered adequate housing, even if you've got a job. That's pathetic. Nobody should be going without food, going without housing. Nobody should have to ration simple things like insulin or medications. All right, what have we become? And we have trolls out there and people that support the LNP and their policies, but they're supporting social murder. How did we get from the diggers and the mateship that this country was known for to, stuff you, Jack, I don't care if your kids are starving. Well, we're going to end up with 40% of our population's kids starving because of the policies that are in play now that will only get worse if this government get away with it all and get back in, because they'll just tighten the screws more, up the ante. And if you really want to know where things are going, check out how the UK system's doing under the Tories and their DWP system. Because when they started stuffing around with their disability support services and removing services from their disabled, right, and then doing reassessments of people every 6 months that were disabled to make sure they've still qualified for their in-home supports, 10,000 people died in the first 6 weeks of that policy being introduced. It's now 9 years down the track or so, and they've got 2.2 million people that are dead. Okay? Because people have been deemed fit for work that couldn't go back to work. People had cancer, people were in wheelchairs, they lost all their mobility aids, they lost their carers, they couldn't pay their bills, their power's turned off, they've died of starvation in the lounge room, and when services go in and open the fridge, there's the insulin sitting in the fridge, but the power had gone off. Right? That's what it's like in the UK. It's getting that way for a lot of people here, and that's not the Australia I want for my daughter to continue to grow up in, and I definitely don't want it for any grandkids that may come along. And I can't even believe that in my 50s I'm seeing this happening, but I am, and it's happening all around me, and we have to change it. So we have to pull our head in, and we need to make sure Labor win the next election. We need to make sure that the Greens in the Senate have got enough power to have influence. You know, we need to make sure that the right people are elected to make sure that the right policies get through. We need change. We need change. I don't like the two-party system the way it's rigged with the coalition. All right, the National Party should stand on its own as well as the Liberal Party. If they did, Labor would have been in anyway, because they in the mix of things, they actually got the more popular vote. Right, they actually got more votes, primary votes, but because of the coalition deal, which rigs our system, you know. Yeah, prepaid electricity, Nikki, they have that in the UK, and you've got to keep feeding the meter for your electricity. If you've got no money, your electricity goes off. Each household's got like a feed the meter type thing. And they've got that here for First Nations people in the Northern Territory and the islands anyway. You know, people don't realise how our First Nations peoples are living, and they're living on prepaid electricities as well. So, yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd just clarify Labor's policy from my understanding of it, so that people don't automate, but they still support income management. Yes, but voluntary with informed consent, right? Unless it's court ordered for child safety or vulnerable persons, which you can't ask for better than that. Every citizen has the right to choose in that, you know, so that when you go and sign up for Social Security, you can have the option. You know, would you like income management? No, thank you. Cool, no worries. Everybody's entitled to have a choice and have their rights protected. Okay, all right, guys. I'll talk to you guys later, and anything else comes up, I'll let you know, and we'll keep posting things to the page as we do. Share the page. Keep sharing the page. Our algorithm's down at the moment, which means that We're not in people's news feeds at the moment. So keep liking the posts, keep sharing the posts, because Facebook's algorithms, you've got to keep us out there. And then I can see from our stats when the algorithms change, because they switch from red to green, and then they go back up again. And then we have a few weeks where they're going up, and then they switch back to red, and they go back down again, up and down. So just keep sharing the page outside of our bubble and keep educating people. You know what I mean? Kat says, without giving details, is the poor guy in the wheelchair on the beach okay? Drew comes in and out of our groups. I don't know. He's been around for quite a while, and I'm sure he'll let us know if anything critical happens. I'll give you a bit of a clue that I'm finding with guys that are on the card. You offer them assistance, and they turn around and say, "I'm fighting my own battle, thank you." They don't mean it. They're just their sense of pride. They're doing things their own way. They're dealing with it by the best they can. And we've got a couple of guys that are on the card that have had hell with it. But when I say, "What can I do for you?" it's okay, I'm dealing with it. We don't push, all right? Drew, we know Drew's around. We'll keep an eye out for him and stuff like that. We will keep an eye out for him. And we don't forget people like him. We know that they're struggling. The guys handle the card differently to the women. And most guys won't even speak about being on the card. It's very hard to get guys to come out and speak against, because they deal with stress differently. They deal with it differently. But we support everybody that's on a card to try and get them off, to try and help them and try and give them the confidence to speak up and share their stories. So we just, try and give everybody that. I do come across sometimes sexist, which I don't mean to do, because the card predominantly does affect and impact women, carers, parents, and it's another factor in how our whole society, our whole system keeps women in poverty. And it's all linked together in a whole range of ways, whether it be social security, when you live with somebody, your payments go down, your partner or your husband might be earning $10 over the threshold, you've got no income whatsoever, all these sorts of things that keep women in poverty. And the cashless debit card is another way that it just impoverishes women and children more. And to be quite honest, we can't afford to have this generations of youth and the next generation of kids growing up in abject poverty. It's not fair. It's so cruel. So we keep plodding along. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you later. See ya.